guys, welcome to this very first course in my YouTube channel. Thank you for joining this course. This is Learn Linux series where you will learn the basic and fundamental concept on Linux, which I think will be enough to get you started in the world of Linux. The main goal will be to take you from potentially knowing nothing about Linux to having a basic level of proficiency with it. You will be able to perform your basic day-to-day tasks in Linux, and if you are from my Facebook post, I hope you have already downloaded the syllabus. If not, the syllabus will be available in the description below. I also recommend you to join our Facebook group called White Hat Technology for future updates on this course and also some interesting tech stuffs. So if you are ready to take this course, don't forget to subscribe this channel for later episodes. So let's get started. In this first episode of this series, we'll talk a little about background and introduction to Linux. We are going to learn about what is Linux, what is operating system, what is free and open source, and we will talk about history of Linux and also how it is different with other operating systems like Mac OS or Windows. So the first question, what is Linux? Linux is a free, open source and community contributed operating system that anybody can download and install on their computer. Free in the sense that you can download Linux and you do not have to pay any money. Open source means the source code for Linux is publicly available. You can literally download the entire source code for Linux in your computer. You can view the source code, you can modify it, and you can use it for your own projects. And community contributed means that the Linux operating system is maintained and developed by thousands of volunteers all around the world. So if you are new to the term operating system, it is something that a computer needs to function. It is a system software that lets humans interact to a hardware, manage computer hardware and software resources, and also provide service for computer programs. You might be running operating system like Windows or Apple Mac OS or Android, Chrome OS. So Linux is different than other in the sense that most operating systems are developed by companies like Microsoft developed Windows, Apple developed Mac OS, but in case of Linux, thousands of volunteers came together to develop an operating system called Linux. When you install it, it will function like every other operating system out there. Now, what is the history behind Linux? Who actually created Linux? Just now I said that thousands of volunteers worked together to create Linux, but the history is quite different. In the very beginning, it all started by one person. His name is Linus Torvalds. He was a college student in Finland in University of Helsinki, and he decided to create an operating system. During that time, the available operating system were DOS, macOS and Unix. In the university where he studied, they used an operating system to teach students called Minix, Unix-based operating system. When he was in university, he learned in Minix, but at home, he didn't have access to Minix because it was commercially made project. You have to buy it, and during that time, the equipments, the technology was very expensive. And now he wants same working environment in home, so he decided to make a clone. Let me show you a Google group discussion in which Linus posted about why and how he is creating a new operating system. So if you look at the group post, he writes that he is currently working on operating system and he is posting to ask people what would you like to see most in Linux. If you want to see and read the group discussion, I'll post the link in the description below. So that's how Linux was created, and from that time to today, in the course of 30 years, thousands of people have contributed to maintain and build the Linux that you see and use nowadays. Now let's talk about free and open source. So as I have already told, free means you do not have to pay, but in case of free, there are different types of free softwares. Free but limited, free and unlimited, free and open source, and free and closed source. So for example, you may have used Google Chrome. So Google Chrome is free to download. You do not have to pay money, but it is not open source. The source code for Google Chrome is not publicly available. The next example is VLC Media Player. You may have used it. It is free and open source. You can download for no cost, and you can literally view all the source code behind the VLC Media Player. So most people get confused between free and open source. So these are the major differences between free and open source. When any software is commercial, it hires developers, but when it's free, it requires community contribution. So for that, Linus Torvalds also created Git. So Git is a versioning software which is used by lots of developers nowadays. He created it so that he can use it to manage all of the volunteers' contribution and balance that one Linux kernel. So you've been hearing a word called kernel for some time now. So let me introduce this very important kernel. When you run an operating system at its deep core, there is a program called kernel. Kernel is used to control the hardware that the operating system is installed on. All the programs that we install do not interact directly with the hardware. They interact through the kernel. So kernel is like a middleman. Linus Torvalds originally wrote the kernel. Only few people are allowed to work on it now. Let me show you the kernel in this Ubuntu machines. As you can see, the size of kernel itself is very small, and if you see the size of the operating system, don't worry about the commands right now. We'll go through them all in the later episodes. So Linux is technically a kernel and not an operating system. Normal people don't care about that, but if you meet a developer or Linux administrator, they are very specific about these words. Now all the other stuffs in Linux beside the kernel in the study year of time come from other people, the volunteers. The biggest contributor is a project called GNU Software Project. It creates all the other tools that we use today in Linux, like bash command prompt. Commands like copy, delete, move are created as a part of GNU Software Distribution. So basically saying GNU plus kernel will give us a complete operating system. Now let's talk about its differences with Windows. So Mac OS uses Unix too. So switching from Mac to Linux will be pretty smooth. But in case of switching from Windows to Linux, it's very different. So the first major difference between Windows and Linux is file system. In Windows, files are stored in folders and different data drives like C, D, E. But in Linux, files are ordered in a tree structure starting with the root directory. So this root directory can be considered as the start of the file system, and its further branches out various other subdirectories. The root is denoted with a forward slash. In Linux, everything is file. Directories are files, files are files, and devices like keyboard, mouse, printer are files. But in Windows, these devices like printers, CD-ROMs, and hard drives are represented as drive letters. All these file types, including devices, have permission which allow user to read, edit, and execute. Restriction to access can be applied for different kinds of user by changing the permission. There are three types of user in Linux called regular user, administrative user, and service user. Regular user account is created for you when you install Linux in your system. All your files and folders are stored in a home directory. As a regular user, you don't have access to directories of another user except yours. Another user called administrative user is created during installation. It is a super user who can access restricted files and install software and have administrative privileges. If you want to install any software, make changes to the system files, or perform any administrative task, you need to be logged in as an administrative user. For any general task, you can perform with a regular user account. Linux is widely used as a server operating system. Services like Apache have its own service account, and having service accounts increases the security of the computer. Linux can allow or deny access to various resources depending on the services. Desktop version of operating system like Ubuntu desktop do not have service accounts. In Windows, you can't have two files with the same name in the same folder. But in Linux, you can have two files with the same name in the same directory if they have different cases. In Linux, for every user, a directory is created as a home/username. In Windows, system and program files are usually saved in C drive. But in Linux, you will find the system and program files in different directories. For example, boot files are stored in boot directory. Program and software files can be stored in bin directory, and devices files under dev directory. So I think this will be it for the first episode, introduction and background to Linux. I hope you learn a lot about Linux, its history, and how it is different with other operating systems. In the next episode, we'll talk about where the Linux is actually used and different types of Linux distribution that are used nowadays. So see you in the next episode, and don't forget to subscribe the channel so you get notified when the next episode is uploaded. And I also recommend you to join the White Hat Technology Facebook group for regular updates of this course and other tech stuff. See you in the next episode. Till then, goodbye, peace.